Welcome to Free Beer Friday, powered in part by Classic of Denton. Well, hey everybody, it is Free Beer Friday. It is Friday here in downtown Denton, and a good weather night here in Denton as well. We've got a lot of people out on the square. It's been a really, really good night thus far. So if you are not joining us here in the downtown square, you need to be. Now, if you've never joined us before, you don't know what's different. But if you have joined us before, you know that I am not your normal Free Beer Friday host. Usually you have the main monk himself, Ben Easley of the Bearded Monk, but he is out tonight, so unfortunately you have me. But tonight is not about me. Tonight is about my very special guest here on Free Beer Friday. And we're doing something a little different tonight. And all of you home brewers or craft brewers or beer nerds out there, tonight is for you. Every now and then Ben comes to me and he goes, I think we've gotten a little too beer nerdy. And I'm like, there's no such thing as too beer nerdy. So tonight we have
Charles from Texas Draft Services.
Super, super excited to have you here today. And tonight we're kind of talking a little bit about what you guys do at Texas Draft Services, and then kind of your story, the story of a lot of the bars you work with, and then we want to get a little bit into the kind of tips and things for home brewers and craft brewers that want to get into this thing, because you're the guy, you're the mad scientist that understands how all this works. So
Well, I'd like to think I'm one of them. There's a lot of them out there, and it's fun to talk to them. So
good. So go ahead and give everybody a little bit of. So let us know what you do, and then we'll get into how you got there.
all right. So what I do is I work with Texas Draft Services. I actually started it with one of my friends, and what we do is we work with a lot of the local breweries that are self-distributing to kind of maintain their lines in the market, make sure that they're being cleaned every 2 weeks, and kind of meet that standard that the Brewers Association recommends and that really the beer warrants. And so we also then work with bars and restaurants to just clean all of there's kind of a gap in the market of making sure they're being clean. And so we kind of want to step in and show, hey, this can be done. Let's do it.
Yeah. Well, and that's what's really cool. So we've got to chat a little bit before we got started, and I didn't realize that it was sort of on the provider of the beer to clean out the lines and all of that kind of stuff. I just thought the bar or the restaurant or whoever was doing it, but whoever's bringing that beer is cleaning out that line. Then you get into the craft beer world where you're just doing all you can do to keep your bar afloat. Now you've got to go and clean all these lines as well as provide them with all this beer.
Yeah,
so
that's
it's interesting.
That's interesting to me because I've been in this side of the business for so long that I just kind of know in Texas that it's on the distributor and the brewery side. But it makes sense on the consumer side that you think that the bars will take care of it because it's the same way with a kitchen, the grill's being cleaned by staff there, things like that. And I think that it's probably a little bit better for the bar to do it just on making sure it's being done. Back when there was just 2 distributors, you can kind of make sure that they were both there every other week.
Sure.
Now that there's 5 distributors in this market, plus countless self-distributed breweries, it's getting hard to make sure, especially with heavy rotation and all of those kind of other issues.
Yeah.
So,
well, and that's, to me, I mean, let's say you've got 12 taps, and, historically, like you said, 6 of them would be with one guy and 6 of them would be with another. Cool. Well, now all of a sudden you've got 6 taps with one guy, and then you've got the other 6 are 6 different craft breweries.
And it might get cleaned by brewery A, like tap number 1 might be cleaned by brewery A on Tuesday, and then they come back 2 weeks later. It's not theirs anymore.
Right.
And that brewery that it is now would be cleaned on Wednesday if they're showing up every 2 weeks, which is kind of what we're here for, is to make sure that we're able to get there. But if that brewery, if it switches back to brewery A on Tuesday, it skips a clean because they were there the day before. And that's kind of what we call the rotator problem, is that we rotate beer so much now, which as a consumer I love.
Right.
I mean, I love seeing different beer on, you try new things, but also having my regular ones that I always go to.
Sure.
And that's, I think for most bars, they like it because it keeps things interesting. It's like adding new menu items, right?
Yeah.
You get to do that. But on a logistics standpoint, it's kind of a nightmare.
Yeah.
So
understandable. Well, and so you guys are there almost as a facilitator for this craft beer world to honestly to exist. And it's so cool that more and more businesses are being built on top of the infrastructure of craft brewers and craft brewing becoming more and more and more mainstream. I just think that's cool. And so, when you guys are going in and you're cleaning out a line, this is more than just, okay, I'm trying to keep it clean. You guys are affecting the taste of the beer, the quality of the beer, and the experience that you're going to get.
And basically, so like I don't know if I mentioned earlier, we follow the Brewers Association kind of guidelines, and we do that because that's what they're there for, is to help kind of guide people into it. And we've noticed there is that difference where before we clean it and after, even though we were there 2 weeks before.
Yeah.
But it's to get rid of all that organic material in there, the yeast, the bacteria, those microbes causing off flavors, and even just the hop resins or the characteristics from the beer before. And then every quarter we'll take out, do an acid clean and take out all the inorganic material,
Right.
which is just all the mineral deposits, your beer stone and water stone. And we do that so that the organic material can't latch back on us easily and build up even quicker. And that's just, we respect the breweries we work with, and even the ones we don't work with, they make some really good beer, and nothing's worse than getting a pint and saying, man, this isn't what I remember.
Yeah.
And more often than not, it is what you remember, just through bad lines.
Yeah.
And that, unfortunately, we've noticed a lot of times people blame the brewery. They go, this is what I remember. They must have gone downhill or changed the recipe or something. When usually they didn't. I mean, it happens.
Sure.
It's
In
any
anything,
business.
that's the case. Yeah.
But no one tends to think of, maybe it's the bar that I'm at, or this one just seems like something happened here.
Yeah. No, that's fair. Well, and again, just interesting to me. I mean, when muggles like us that aren't in this world, like that kind of stuff is interesting, because I don't even think about all the logistics and the 100,000 different things that have to happen just for me, the in person, to get that beer and to get it at its best quality. And so, again, the same way you said, the kitchens or the restaurant's responsible for cleaning the kitchen. Yeah. So I never even think about the bar having to be. I mean, they've got to bottle it, they got to can it, and they got to deal with the tap.
They've got to ensure the quality once it's already been sold.
Yeah,
and that's something I think is unique to. I'm sure there's other industries, but at least the ones I'm familiar with, it's kind of unique that I've seen that you kind of expect the manufacturer or the distributor to handle that. And that's not even true for the whole U.S. I know there's like 12 states where it's the bar and restaurants or the retailer's responsibility. Right. And that's kind of what, you even said that kind of just makes sense to you because it's their product, their property now. They're the ones selling it. When someone buys a bottle of rum and puts it in a drink, the rum, distillery can't come and say, no, we don't like you making it that way.
Right.
And that's...
You put it with Diet Coke? What are you doing?
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of what's... we're doing is going like, well, the bar and restaurants don't do it. So they go, hey, you're not doing it right, so we'll do it for you. And in Texas, they're allowed to, which I'm glad that they're allowed to, because I've seen some of these lines, and I can't even imagine what would happen if they weren't. But in the states that, when I visited, and I love going there because I don't have to worry. I just get something on draft because they're required to get them cleaned.
Yeah. And
whether they do it or hire a third party depends on the state and however their stuff's written. But it has to be done. There's a little bit of consumer confidence going in. Whereas there's some bars and I love a good dive bar.
Sure.
But there's some dive bars I'm buying bottles.
Yeah.
Just because
fair.
I can tell there's a certain smell that once you know what it is, it's hard to ignore. And usually you can't smell it from our side of the bar, but you can once you get behind it. There's some where you can smell it from the consumer side. And that I still go to those places. They're really cool places, but I just don't buy draft beer. And I don't like limiting what I'm buying because of that.
Right.
I want to do it for other reasons. Like, I'm not feeling like a stout today. I'm not feeling like whatever's happening over there.
Yeah.
So.
No, very interesting. Well, and so you would suggest if you're in a dive bar and you're a little bit nervous about that, just go ahead and get the bottle.
And I don't want to say that for all dive. There's some dive bars are really well done, but the ones that are open at like 8 at night and they don't get there till 7:50.
Yeah.
It's hard for those to get cleaned, and some of them do it themselves. Absolutely.
Sure.
And I think it's just kind of judge it while you're there, or at least if you get something on tap and it doesn't taste right, or it's a little bit flatter than it should be, or anything like that, don't automatically assume it was the brewery.
Sure.
Because a lot of times it's not, and there sometimes definitely is. I mean, things happen. But in this case, in my experience, it tends to be more on the delivery system of that beer.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, so I'm new to the beer world. I'm trying to say hypotheticals, but it's true. And I want to start getting into craft brewing. What tips, best practices, things should I be looking at from a mechanic side that you can give us some expertise on?
When you say mechanic side, you mean like what kind of steps you should take if you want to
Steps you
enter
could
more
take,
into it, or
maintenance. I mean, some people may not even realize that if they're not cleaning their equipment at the right times or in the right intervals, that it's going to affect the taste of their beer.
okay, so you mean less on a like consumer, more on like a home brewer
Exactly.
or someone owning a
Yeah,
bar.
yeah,
And so if you're home brewing at home, which by definition you probably are, go ahead and make sure you're sanitizing, because make sure that your finished product is gonna have the best potential for success. Right. There's no reason to go, I don't need to sanitize that today because it's probably not going to be an issue, even if it's a 2% chance.
Yeah.
I mean, hopefully you like it enough, you keep doing it, where you're going to do 100 batches, and throwing out 2 of those, it's not going to be fun either time.
Yeah.
So I was just making sure that you're following that sanitation process, making sure that, and then if you do ever get to kegging, make sure that you're not just ignoring the fact that that's there.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people will just replace their lines every 2-3 months, which is kind of an alternative to the acid clean. And on a homebrewer standpoint, if you've got even just 2 taps, I mean, that's a couple dollars a year. So if you have the time, go for it. But I know other people who will keep 2 corny kegs, one with water, one with the cleaner in it, just to clean it themselves, and they'll do it between batches instead of having to pour a little bit of their beer out, or just do a not just taking off their beer and doing it whatnot every 2 weeks. Theoretically, you should still do it every 2 weeks. You might get a benefit of not moving as much beer through it, but that buildup still happens. There's still chemical reactions. There's still microbes and potential yeast doing things. Usually it's too cold for that. But there's still off flavors building. So it's hard for me to say you should do it because I'm lazy and I don't even do it. But I still like to do it occasionally. It's just sometimes difficult when I get home. I'm like, I don't want to do extra work.
Right.
When I now have an excuse for my beer not tasting like as good as I want it to. Right?
Yeah.
I can just go, I did a good job, but I didn't clean them, so that's why it's not great.
Right.
But it follows the same principles.
Yeah.
I mean, the same kind of things are going to happen. But the biggest thing is it doesn't matter as much at the homebrew level on keg to faucet as it does the actual making it. Usually there's bigger steps you can do there, just because most homebrewers, and there's a lot of phenomenal ones that have been in competitions who are consistently putting out good product, that they don't have to worry about that process. They already know what they're doing. But for the newer ones, that's the biggest step up I've seen, is just making sure your sanitation is done correctly and recording your process. Because I mean, we're a community of people who love to talk to people. Yeah. And when we say, hey, when did you do this, or what did you do here? And they go, oh, I don't remember because it was 3 weeks ago. There's no extra advice. As opposed to going like, let me check the notes real quick. I did this. Go, I would recommend doing it this way. I know that it doesn't make sense on paper, but I've always had good luck with it. Sometimes it's just that good luck feeling. Other times it's an actual reason. They go, these people recommend this, these people recommend this. I find the middle ground works, or whatever it is. So that, for me, is the biggest steps, is just kind of hammering down that process so that it's, repeatable.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, and we got to talk about that a little bit before we got started, and we were talking about this very topic, and you said, it's better to have something that may not be 100% that you can do again than to have something 100% that you'll never be able to do again.
Yeah, I mean, it feels great to make a phenomenal beer. It does. And some people, I don't want to say a lot of it, some people are cool with that, just being like, I made a great beer, and let me go try a whole another one.
Right.
But for me, I want to be able to do that same thing again. If it was so good that I just wish I could drink it every year, and I'm never going to have it again, yeah, there's a certain, I guess, kind of that poeticness to not being able to have something again, so it increases the enjoyment. But I still don't like that. I want to have it again. Yeah. And so, yeah, I'd rather sacrifice a little bit of the chance quality, where you might get an extra 5 or 10% by luck. Yeah. By making that skill based, or that repeatable kind of scientific approach to it. Yeah. While still you're making a product to be enjoyed. Yeah. Which is
and I have to believe that in making beer, because it's you're going to make it, and then you've got to wait and hope that the yeast is going to do its thing in the way that you want it to, and all of that kind of stuff. I would hate for the fact that because I didn't take the right precaution, or yeah, I cleaned it, but maybe not enough, or yeah, I cleaned it, but maybe not often enough. Like, it's not like a sandwich where if I make the sandwich and I screwed it up and I throw it out, there's not a whole lot of like, I'm not going to die.
Yeah, it's not like when you crack the egg and you go, I know I should do each one in a bowl, pour it in one at a time because one of them might be bad, and you just waste a couple eggs.
Yeah, but with beer, you've waited for like weeks for this to happen, and now all of a sudden you pour it and you go, I forgot to do that thing, or I didn't do that, and now I've been waiting on this for so long.
Well, and it will happen. I mean, it happens
Sure.
to everyone. I mean, even at the professional level, something happens. Sometimes it's not necessarily their fault. Sometimes it's their yeast provider's fault. It's kind of a lawsuit going on right now, but a lot of times it's just you do it enough, you kind of get in the habit.
Yeah.
And it's like when you drive home and you're like, how did I get all the way over here? Because you kind of autopilot.
Yeah.
You got to kind of put steps to counteract that very human nature of just, I've already done this before. Let me just do what I always do. Let your brain rest in case there's an emergency. Well, we don't need that anymore. We're at the safety of our own home. Maybe with the burn if you got flammables around it, but I mean, it's, ideally you don't. And so it's sometimes just making sure that you don't fall into that trap of, well, I already know what I'm doing, so I'm not going to double check this.
Right.
And yeah, because like you said, it's a time investment too. You've done, a couple hours on brew day.
Yeah.
Now you've waited, a week or two.
Yeah.
Or even longer, just to find out that that was all wasted time. And if you're especially new, you don't have another, carb or any other fermentation space. You can't brew the next weekend. You've got to wait until that's emptied before you can brew again. So now you've just run out of your hobby and you have nothing to show for it except for hopefully learning something.
Yeah.
I don't mind messing up because I learned from it. But if you didn't record what you were doing, you don't really know where in your process you might have fallen through.
Yeah.
So.
No, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So tell us a little bit about the Brewers Association, because I think that's interesting as well.
So the Brewers Association's, I can't remember when they merged, but there was two different kind of trade associations, and basically just similar to the Texas Craft Brewers Guild. But there were two organizations, and they merged to form the Brewers Association and provide a unified front for craft brewers to really push their agenda, as well as educate people, kind of provide a network of, hey, talk to these association members. They've been there, or they've got allied trade members, so that tank manufacturers or refrigeration specialists, things like that. That anything that a brewery might need, they've got in there. Lawyers, even just anything that has dealt with TTB law or the process of setting up the paperwork. And so they provide a lot of extra information, just the amount of production in each state. The growth of craft in the market year over year, comparisons to the overall beer market, and they do a lot of good work for kind of providing resources and encouragement to the craft community, and then they usually tend to work alongside the states, where the states handle more of the local state politics, and Brewers Association will handle more federal level things. But it's just it's a trade group with a trade association that's made up of brewers and people who want to be in the beer industry. Which the reason I got into it was I went to enough events where I got to meet the brewer or the salesperson or the owner, and kind of said, these guys are cool. I want to see more of these people on a day-to-day basis. I don't want to work with people where I can't wait to get home.
Yeah.
I want to work with people where I go, oh, whoops, I should have left in a couple hours ago. And that's what, it still ends up being work. It sounds great. And you realize, oh, I only got 3 hours of sleep last night.
Right.
But, it's, at least you get to enjoy the work for the most part. And, I think it's usually a lot of brewery owners and whatnot end up realizing, oh, hey, I put in 85, 90, 5-hour weeks. If they're lucky, they're just that. Because everyone gets to do kind of everything, as opposed to, a lot of, it's really any startup. You've got a couple people doing everything, wearing all the hats.
Right.
And having that kind of group really helps with, okay, well, this is a new one for me. Who do I ask about this? And you've got those resources.
Cool.
Which is the nice thing, is that with booming so much, you've got a lot of people who have experience that just went through what you're going through, setting up or even having a new experience for a 3-4-year-old brewery, but they just turned that 6 months ago or handled a similar problem. So it's kind of cool to have that group of people.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just love it. I just think there's so many people that want to get into the craft beer world, both personally and professionally. And to see that you've got Brewers Association, you've got organizations like yours that can go and clean the lines because, they may not have the manpower to do all of these things.
Well, that was one of the things is we wanted to help it to be easier to be a brewery.
Yeah.
Not that it's ever going to be easy.
Yeah, sure.
But if we can take, 5% of it away,
right,
you don't have to worry about, do we have someone tracking all that? Is it being done? You just kind of get that comfort knowing it was done. And same to the consumer is that, our long-term strategy, we want to work with more retailers. Work with a few right now, but the next 6 months we're putting a big push on that. Where you walk in, you'll see that kind of that protected by, there'll be, lines cleaned and maintained by us, and you go, oh, I can order anything on here. It's going to taste like it should. And if it doesn't, let's alert the brewery because it's on their end at that point.
Yeah.
So
that's cool. I love that. Very, 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 very cool. Well, before we wrap up, let's talk a little bit about kind of where all this came from and how it all culminated. I mean, the chemistry and the mechanics and all of this. We talked kind of quite a while before the show got started, and got to talk about the social aspects of the craft beer world and how a lot of people get into it because of the relationships that they have or things like that. And where did all this come from? How did it all start for you?
Well, for me, it just came down from I started going to an Irish themed pub in College Station when I went to school there, and I started just going with friends, and then the bartenders were nice, so I'd I'll get there half an hour before my friends get here, grab a beer, talk to them. And I think what's great about beer is that it is a full glass. You'll pay your $5-6 for a lot of things. Some will go a little higher, whatnot, but you'll get a substantial amount of liquid. So you're not just accidentally finishing a 4-ounce drink, in 10 minutes, being like, oh, this is breaking the bank.
Right.
You get to really enjoy that. And so I kind of took that further and said, okay, well, I want to go to these events. Friends can't make it. I'll still go. You meet your bar family, right? The ones that you've got a regular spot. And, I was living up here as the Monk, and I still was there earlier. And there's still people I know that just 5 or 6 of them just hanging out. And I think that there's that, I don't know how that initially formed, but it's just everyone's usually in a pretty good mood when they're grabbing a beer. And I think that a lot of it's due to the fact that you've got a drink that can last you a while. So you're not getting up to go somewhere else, or it's not just with a meal.
Smart.
And that kind of that cost, for at least getting into beer, that the cost of entry is much lower than a lot of other things. If you want to learn to make cocktails, you have to buy a whole bottle of alcohol. Which, if you're looking to do things kind of on the cheap, which I think especially when people are getting into drinking, they are.
Right.
That's kind of an easy way to try new things. And then people like to share what they like about the beer, but it never, I'm not going to say never, it doesn't tend to get as pretentious as certain other things. It's definitely started to come out that way for some groups, but I think that for the most part, it's still beer. It doesn't matter how great of a beer it is. There's still this mindset of beer's just a drink you drink with a group of people, with friends. And I don't know if that's because liquid itself. I think a good part of it is, but I think once it's ingrained, it just kind of becomes a piece of its own, and I'm not complaining because it's
love it.
Nice seeing that it just brings out people want to have a good time and hang out with people, not necessarily, be out till 3 in the morning.
Sure.
Be like, oh, I gotta get home now. But even just swinging by, having a beer with friends is something that I think is, I don't want to say 100% unique to beer, but it definitely shines in that world.
Very cool. Well, I love it. All right, everybody. We are going to wrap up here for Free Beer Friday. Thank you very, very much for tuning in with us. We really do appreciate it. Thank you again for coming by.
Absolutely. I'm glad you had us.
Yeah. Next week, we will have Ben Easley back in the studio, bringing you the next brewer and talking all that beer lingo and knowledge and stuff that I really have no idea about at all. But I like it. Anyways, thank you all again for tuning in. We're going to jump back into the music on DentonRadio.com. We appreciate all of you guys being here. We'll see you on the next show. Well, thank you for tuning in. We hope you enjoyed the show. Be sure to check out DentonRadio.com for new Denton artists and where they're playing next. While you're surfing the internet, make sure you check out our friends Classic of Denton at ClassicofDenton.com.